Hello, future real estate professionals. Welcome back to the Colibri Real Estate channel, where we're challenging lives one home at a time. I'm Sue Willoughby, a licensed real estate advisor with nearly a decade of experience in the state of Washington. And I've also been a real estate instructor with Colibri for 3 years. I'm passionate about sharing real-world insights and helping you turn your real estate dreams into reality. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of prorations. Understanding prorations is crucial for anyone involved in real estate transactions because the day of closing is the day of reckoning, and that is a very important day in a real estate transaction. So let's break it down step by step. Before we get into any math examples, let's talk about what a proration actually is. Whenever a real estate closing takes place, this is the final day when everything is reconciled and the buyer gets their keys to their new home and the seller walks away with their net proceeds from the sale. So this day is called the day of closing. So for example, let's say the day of closing is on May 15th, in the middle of the month. This date acts as the financial dividing line when the closing agent has to determine who is responsible for expenses before and after closing. So prorations can include various expenses such as rent if it's an investment property, real estate taxes, the homeowners association dues or fees, and even something like pool maintenance, for example. These are all expenses that need to be fairly divided between the buyer and the seller. And this happens at closing. Meanwhile, the escrow and closing agents have been working on calculating and getting all of these numbers together until they finally come down to that last day of the transaction. So for this example, let's take something simple like pool maintenance. Suppose the pool maintenance fee is paid on the first of the month for the entire month, so it's paid in advance. If the closing date is May 15th and the seller has already paid for the entire month, then the buyer will need to reimburse them for the portion after they take possession of the property. So if the 15th of May is the date of closing, then the buyer is going to be responsible for the 16th on through the end of May. So here's how we calculate this. The seller paid for 31 days, but only lived there for 15. So the buyer will be charged for the remaining 16 days of the pool maintenance fee of $100. So we need to figure out what that's going to be. So the formula is going to be the number of days times the amount. So we've got 16 days times the amount of $100 divided by the total days. So the actual numbers in this calculation are 16 days times $100, so 16 times 100, then divided by 31. That's going to give us $51.61. This amount will be a debit to the buyer. That means that the money will come from the buyer back to the seller, and it'll appear as a credit to the seller in the settlement statement. Now, let's look at a real question involving rent proration. This question says that an investor purchased a duplex that was rented for $475 per month. The closing will be on March 19th, with the day of closing belonging to the buyer. So that means as of March 19th, the buyer is responsible for the property and any expenses that the seller may have paid in advance or whatever. That's the day that the buyer takes over. What is the amount of the proration and how will it be entered into the closing statement? So that's the question that we're pondering here. The calculation that we're going to come up with is what is the prorated amount and how will it show up in the closing statement? March has 31 days. So the seller collected rent for the entire month, but is only entitled to the rent up to March 18th. The buyer is then entitled to the rent from March 19th through the end of the month, the 31st. So that is 18 days for the seller, right? So the seller has 18 days and the buyer has 13 days. The seller collected the full amount, and now the seller has to transfer the part that they've already collected in a prorated amount to the new buyer. So the formula for this is going to be the number of days times the total rent divided by the total days. So 13 days, which is how much days are left in the month, times $475 divided by 31, which is the total days in the month. That means that what the total is going to come out of that calculation, $199.19. So the seller will be debited, it'll show up as a debit to the seller on the settlement statement for $199.19, and the buyer will be credited that same amount. All right, let's do another proration example, this time with property taxes. So in this question, the property taxes for the year are $840. The day of closing is July 16th, and the day of closing belongs to the seller. So that means the seller is responsible for July 1st through the 16th. Using a 365-day year, what is the correct entry on the closing statement? So property taxes are paid in arrears for this example, which means that at the end of the year, you pay for the year that you just finished. So for example, the seller is responsible for the taxes from January 1st to the 16th because the taxes are not paid yet. They're paid in arrears, so they haven't been paid yet. But the seller has had possession of the property for that first part of the year, from January 1st to July 16th. That adds up to 197 days. So the formula for this, once again, is the number of days times the annual tax divided by the total days. In this case, the number of days for the seller, 197 days times $840, which is the total tax for the year. And then that's divided by the number of days in the year, 365. That's going to come out to $453.37. Since the taxes are paid in arrears, the seller will have to pay the buyer for their portion of the taxes. The seller will be debited $453.37, and the buyer will be credited for that same amount. Understanding prorations is crucial for ensuring a fair and accurate closing process. You will receive a settlement statement that you will need to review with your buyers and/or sellers. Always double check your calculations and make sure debits and credits match. All right, that's it for today's session on prorations. I hope this helps you understand how to approach these types of questions on your exam. Thanks again for watching, and if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the Colibri Real Estate channel for more tips and tricks. Good luck, and I will see you on the next one.